I call Sir Hugo Swire.
I pay tribute to the honourable gentleman for Inverclyde for securing the speech. I like to feel I played some part in making this speech happen today, because had I not lost Greenock and Inverclyde, which I fought valiantly in the 1997 general election, he might not actually be here with us. That in itself was something of a gamble, that election, I can tell you. Mr. Chairman, I just was reviewing some of the things that I was speaking about when I was the Shadow Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport between 2005 and 2007, opposite the late Dame Tessa Gile, whose memorial service I was pleased to attend. And Tessa, I think, was slightly conflicted during that time, because the Labour Party of the day was absolutely obsessed with the idea, which they imported from America, of inner-city super casinos, which they thought were going to be the panacea to all the problems of inner-city regeneration. And so we debated that back and forth across the House, and many people on all sides of the House thought this was a terrible idea, and in the end it didn't really happen. But at the same time, what was beginning to emerge was the whole issue of online gambling. And although Tessa herself admitted in 2006 to saying that she had presided over an explosion of online gambling, she was concerned about the regulatory side of this, particularly in trying to regulate offshore gambling, and that remains, I think, a problem. But also, at the same time, I think the government of the day and governments since have always been one step behind. In 2006, I remember being rather critical. It's a job in opposition to be critical of the government. And I remember being critical of a summit that she put on called the International Summit on Remote Gambling, held at Royal Ascot, rather appositely, home of racing, in October 2006, where they prioritised crime, competition and safeguards for children and vulnerable people. But the conference had very, very little to say on how to prevent gambling-related harm or its associated social costs from the growing online arena. And reviewing what I said and the questions I laid down and all the debates we had from that period, it is, I think, salutary to think that we haven't really moved on that much. So the latest figures from the Gambling Commission showed that 48% of adults participate in some form or other of gambling. For online gambling, the figure is 18% of adults, and I should think, I don't know, the Minister will be able to correct me, I should think that's a figure that's probably more likely to increase than decrease. Now, the issue of problem gambling, this is defined as behaviour related to gambling that causes harm to the gambler and those around them. That is confined, and the figures look small at face value, to 0.5% of adults, with 1.1% at moderate risk and 3.3% at low risk. This is according to the Problem Gambling Severity Index, one of the most robust estimates of problem gambling. So that defines, in this rather tight category, problem gambling. But what is more difficult to estimate the gambling-related harms to society, because the term gambling-related harms itself does not have a strict definition. The body that provides independent advice to the Gambling Commission, the Responsible Gambling Strategy Board, lists the social costs of gambling-related harms as including loss of employment, health-related problems, homelessness and suicide. So, of course, thank you, Boyd.
This issue, because although the headline figure appears to be that only a small percentage of the population in general are affected by problem gambling, the reality is the harms that manifest in that group are widespread, and they are considerable in terms of the economic damage they do to those people and their families, but also considerable in terms of the wider damage to society. And to just look at those headline figures, as he rightly said, would be misleading.
Well, I think I hope shortly we will hear from my right honourable friend, the right honourable member for Chingford and Woodford, that was certainly used to be his, Woodford Green, who's done much work in this area, not least on fixed odds betting terminals and which are themselves described as a crack cocaine of gambling. And he has done much work and will be better able to inform the debate than I am. So, but I don't want to take up too much time, so other than to say we've been debating this for many, many years. I don't believe we've got it right. I think it is a huge problem and remains a huge problem. I think it is difficult to regulate, but not impossible. And I think we want to hear from the government how much more robust the government can be. I have just 5 quick points I would like to put to the Minister. One is, will the government treat gambling as a public health issue, as we do with mental health? Will she think of introducing tougher verification checks, which could ensure that young gamblers are not drawn online? Has she considered limiting gambling adverts during sports match breaks to 1 per break per company? We heard from the Honourable Gentleman for Inverclyde how the relationship between particularly online gambling organisations and organised sport is almost one and the same now. Will she agree to conduct a full review of the social costs of gambling? For example, the government has never made an estimate of the cost of gambling-related harm to the NHS. And will she ensure that gambling-related harm is included when health education is made compulsory in all state-funded schools, as my honourable friend said, as part of teaching on mental well-being? Mr. Chairman, we hear and read on an almost daily basis about problems to do with mental health, and I'm glad that now we talk about mental health in a way we perhaps never have done. It's one of the hidden problems in society. But I would suggest that mental health, in some cases, not all, in some cases can be, and is identified as being, exacerbated by dependency on drugs, alcohol and, yes, gambling. And it's a hidden form as well, because, of course, if you're online, you can do it on your computer in your own room. It's not the gambling that people think about of 50, 60 years ago, which was a social occasion, be it a bingo or in a casino. This is a hidden form of playing with money and very often playing with people's lives.